again, and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I am going to educate you, nay, enlighten you on the pure badassery that is Colonel Iron Hand Straken. This guy is a special character for your Imperial Guard armies, and he is undiluted awesomeness. Ever since using him on the tabletop and even at tournaments, I now consider him a veritable auto-include in nearly all of my Imperial Guard army lists. And I guarantee you, by the time you have finished watching this video, you too will want to run the Bionic Man. For once you have supped upon and tasted the unbelievable, the delectable combat prowess that is Colonel Straken, you will find it very difficult to go back to the bland, unseasoned, no-named characters of the past. And so, as is tradition, with that very bold statement made, let us draw our Catachan fangs, show some cold steel and courage, and dive right into today's episode. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this picture on screen right now and you're going, "Oh, Straken, you magnificent beast. Wrap me up in your big muscly arms and make me feel safe forever." I know that's exactly what I'm thinking. But I also know that some of you are going to be a little confused because you're going to be thinking, "But Morning Glory, didn't you do a unit review on Straken? Didn't you give him a rather middling score?" "Oh, I did, dear viewer, I did. For my sins, I must confess them. Shame me, lambast me in the comment section. For I was but an ignorant little conscript. And now that I have tried Straken out on the tabletop, I can confidently say that this guy is genuinely competitive and also probably the most fun I have had with a guard officer in my entire career playing Warhammer 40k. My God, sir, that was another bold statement, but let me explain myself. You see, when I last reviewed Straken, I looked at his stats purely from the perspective of using him as a regular senior officer, and I said that basically he was a senior officer, he could do the extra orders, he could hand out the reroll ones, but his abilities weren't that great, and so whilst he was a fun unit to use, he probably wasn't overly competitive. This was looking at him from entirely the wrong angle. You see, the reason why Straken is so good is he brings a serious amount of combat punch in an incredibly points efficient package. And in fact, for many guard players, if you are looking for a bit of combat punch in your arm, but you're struggling to find the points for things like Rough Riders and Ogryns and Bullgryns, then Straken is absolutely the answer to your prayers. So before we go any further, let's remind ourselves of Straken's stats. You might have missed my last unit review, or perhaps you're unfamiliar with the unit in general. So Colonel Iron Hand Straken is an HQ choice, and he is a senior officer. That means he comes with all of the benefits of things like your Caning Helens. He can do 2 orders, he can give out reroll 1s to hit, all that kind of good stuff. But he actually comes with a very, very impressive stat line. In fact, interestingly enough, I checked this. He has a better stat line than a Space Marine Captain, but he costs 10 points less, which is just bonkers. So he comes with Movement 6, Weapon Skill 2+, Ballistic Skill 3+, Strength 6 natively, Toughness 4, 5 wounds, 6 attacks, Leadership 9, and a 3+ save. This guy's muscles are so large that he gets a 3+ armor save. That's pretty badass. Normal Catachan muscles only give you a 5+ armor save, but this guy is so utterly stacked that he's coming in with a 3+ armor save. In addition to this, he actually gets a 4+ invulnerable save, which is one of the best invulnerable saves that you can get in the Guard Codex. In fact, the only invulnerable save that I think is better is technically the Lord Solar's, and the only reason that one is better is because it halves incoming damage. But apart from that, Straken has got a better invulnerable save than Creed, better invulnerable save than Command Squad, better invulnerable save than Death Corps Marshals. Katie says 4+ invulnerable save is pretty good. Put that into perspective, he's got the same invulnerable save as a Custodes. He's pretty badass. Now, he then comes with a bionic arm with Devil's Claw. Now, this is the main weapon that he's going to be using when he's in close combat. And it essentially is AP -3, damage 2. Now, it's strength user, but considering that Straken is strength 6 basic, what this basically means is he is an Imperial Guard commander running around with a power fist that has no negative modifier to hit. And in fact, he gets +1 to hit over most guard officers because he's hitting on a 2 basically in comparison to most other guard characters, which are hitting on a 3. Now, on its own, that's a pretty impressive stat line, worthy of an eyebrow raise from even the most cynical Warhammer player. You are basically a guard officer that gets more attacks, you hit harder, you're tougher, you've got better armor save, you've got better invulnerable save, and you've got a better weapon skill. I mean, that all on its own is enough to at least pique your interest, right? But wait, there's more, because we are going to take Straken, we're going to supercharge him, we're going to dial him up to 11, and we're going to make it so he can 1 versus 1 almost any other man-sized character in the game. Trajan Valoris, he'll take him on. Khan the Betrayer, piece of piss. Calador Drago, but a mote of dust on the wind by the time Straken has dealt with him. And this is not just me making wild, bold statements. I have killed Khan the Betrayer in a 1 versus 1 fight with Straken. I have killed Calador Drago in a 1 versus 1 fight with Straken. And I have fought Trajan Valoris to a goddamn standstill to the point where Trajan was taking more wounds than Straken was with bloody Iron Hand Straken. He is a beast. And the way we do this is incredibly simple. We don't need to start concocting this dark magic, combining 4 different stratagems with some sort of no longer legal army of renown and then throw some salt over our shoulder. Nothing like that. We're going to dial Straken up. We're going to turbo boost him by spending a single command point. You see, like many named characters, Straken has a fixed warlord trait, and it is frontline combatant. Now, frontline combatant is widely considered in the Guard community to be a terrible warlord trait because it makes your Guard characters slightly better in combat. I mean, that's a scenario that most Guard players want to avoid. You don't want your senior officers going in there and smacking people up in combat because Guard officers don't tend to be very good at it. You get a few attacks, you hit on 3s, your strength's a bit rubbish. Why would you take anything that makes you better in combat? Why would you take that over Master Tactician that lets you redeploy things, or Superior Tactical Training so you can make an infinite range Perfector's Command Squad, or take Grand Strategist so you can regenerate CP? All those other things seem infinitely more useful, right? Especially for Guard support characters. And I thought so too. I was guilty of thinking that too. But I have since had an epiphany. I've had a light bulb moment. You see, frontline combatant isn't for the other Guard characters. In my personal opinion, put your tinfoil hats on here, boys, but it's my conspiracy theory that frontline combatant was only included in the Codex for Straken. You see, what this warlord trait does is it gives you 2 bonuses to close combat. The first one you get is for every unmodified 6 to hit that you roll, you generate 2 extra attacks. That's right, it's not just normal exploding 6s, it is double exploding 6s. Now that alone is pretty cool, but then when you take into account the fact that it also gives you a permanent +1 to wound modifier, well, my, suddenly things start getting very spicy indeed. Because once we start applying those bonuses to Straken, we really start to see how potent he is in close combat. I mean, he has 6 attacks base. So statistically, he's going to miss with one of those attacks. But statistically, he's also going to get at least 1 6 as well. Which means every time you roll your 6 attacks with Straken, statistically, you come out with 7 hits because of the double exploding 6s. But then you get onto the wound step. And if you're fighting anything that is Marine or Terminator equivalent or worse, you're going to wound it on 2s. Because Straken is strength 6 natively. And with a +1 to wound all the time, Anything that is toughness 5 or less, he's going to wound on 2s. Terminators, wound on 2s. Death Guard, any sort of units, wounding on 2s. Any kind of Space Marine hero. Khan the Betrayer, wounding on 2s. I told you, Calidor Drago, Trajan, wounding on 2s. He just wounds almost anything that you're going to send him into on 2s. Even some light vehicles, he's going to wound on 2s. So that means you're going to wound with nearly everything. Let's say you drop 1, but that's 6 wounds against your intended target. Just statistically, that's 6 wounds. And so if you're fighting against a equivalent character who's got a 4+ invulnerable save, then they're going to fail half of those, they're going to take 6 damage, and they're going to die. And they're going to die to literally a man who's running around shirtless with a fucking shotgun and a bionic arm. But that's just looking at Straken 1v1 characters. What about when you send him into any sort of infantry unit? Well, single-handedly, he's going to pick up a squad of intercessors or intercessor equivalent because he's going to go in there, he's going to get his 6 wounds through. Statistically, they might save 1 of those. That's still 5 wounds he gets through at 2 damage each. Boom, that's 5 intercessors gone. Oh, brilliant. My 75-point guard meme character just took out 100 points worth of Space Marines without even breaking a sweat. Now, all of this assumes that we've just rolled very boringly and statistically, but this is 40k. It's a dice game. It's random. And Straken has the potential to spike his damage unbelievably high thanks to those exploding 6s. All it takes is for you to be a little bit lucky. Maybe you don't roll any 1s. Maybe you get an extra 6. If that happens, suddenly Straken goes from doing 6 attacks to start off with, and he gets 10 hits. It's relatively easy for Straken to start getting double digits worth of attacks. And this happens more often than you think. As long as you're getting Straken into combat fairly frequently, you're going to create more opportunities for those spikes in damage to occur. In my own personal experience, I took Straken to a tournament. In fact, I'll link that video at the end of this one because it was completely bonkers. And by the end of the event, over the course of 5 games, Straken had killed single-handedly in 1 round of combat every single time 3 Exalted 8-bound, 4 regular 8-bound, 3 Deathwing Terminators, Calidor Drago, and a Space Marine Grey Knight Terminator Librarian. Every single time, he just went in there and he walloped them and completely smashed them in 1 round. And that's just in 1 tournament. I have used this guy in loads of battles, including several battle reports on this channel. And every single time, he always gets that big spike in damage once per game. And he never fails to perform. Look, let me be honest with you. If this had happened once and it had been a cool epic moment, but he'd never been able to replicate it again, I wouldn't be making this video. It just would have been a one-off chance that happened. But when it's happening consistently, when he's performing excellently, consistently, when he's constantly laying the smackdown in combat every single game that I bring him to, it starts being serious and it stops being a meme. Now, it's at this point in the video that I imagine that several of you have been convinced and you're going to go and join the Straken hype train, which is fantastic. But I also know there's going to be a few of you who are thinking to yourselves, okay, Mordy and Glory, this guy sounds pretty cool, pretty badass, but why would I include him in my list over something like Rough Riders, who we all know are a really, really good combat unit? Or why would I even bother worrying about combat when I can just take more guns? First off, Straken is very affordable. He's damn cheap. If you're taking Acadian Castellan in your army, which is already costing you 50 points, then for 25 points more, you can upgrade that Castellan to Straken, and you have got potentially all of the combat prowess you are going to need. If you compare that to, say, a squad of Rough Riders, that's going to cost you 100 points. That is 5% of your total points available to you in your list. You just might not have that. Once you've added in your Rogal Dawn, your Leman Russes, your command squads, all the other units that you want, finding 100 points could be a luxury you simply cannot afford. But getting to the end of a list and being like, I've got 25 points left over. I wonder what to spend them on. Well, you know what I'd spend it on? Add in Straken and cover your combat. And that leads me on to my second point. Because like it or not, close combat is a part of 40k. I know all the Tau players right now are foaming at the mouth saying, you don't need to get into combat, that is dirty warfare. But combat is here. And in fact, some of the most powerful armies out there are close combat armies. And to completely neglect combat and to purely focus on firepower will often lead to situations where you're going to struggle. If you have no combat capability in your army and your opponent starts putting pressure on you, all you're going to do is lose ground as they just throw waves after waves of corn berserkers at you, for example. Or your opponent might be sitting on an objective behind some landslide blocking terrain, and you really need to take him off that objective, but you can't get the firing angle on it, and frankly, the unit defending that objective is going to munch through any guardsmen that you bayonet charge through that wall. This is where Straken comes in. In both of those scenarios, Straken is the solution. If you're getting pressured by a lot of close combat, having the ability to counterattack and counterattack effectively and consistently, because he's a catch, he's protected by lockout surf. You do it right, you can charge the enemy unit, clear them off, and then be ready to do the same thing again. It allows you to clear through those enemy assault waves, those Goth pressure armies, those World Eater armies, and you can start taking the fight to the enemy and start winning on objectives much quicker, which those armies don't want you to do. Or in the second scenario, where you're trying to take an enemy objective that's being defended by a combat unit, you send Straken through that breachable wall. And I guarantee you, once the combat noises have stopped and the clash of blade on bionic arm has ceased, the only thing that's going to be left is Straken atop a pile of bloodied and rent enemy corpses. I mean, hell, I've literally just thought of another one. What if you're facing off against something that's got a phase cap? Something that can only take so many wounds per phase. Now, you might have the big bullshit Banner of Doom, in which case that's fine. Or you might not have the big bullshit Banner of Doom. Or perhaps you do have it, but it's not quite in the right place for you to be able to take advantage of it. Straken allows you to Barney in multiple phases, which means that phase cap enemies are a lot less intimidating. Now, that does cover about 95% of what makes Straken awesome, but I just want to go over a few honorable mentions. First off, you can get him up to strength 7 by taking the brutal strength regimental doctrine. Of course, that does mean giving up born soldiers, so I don't imagine a lot of guard commanders will do that. But getting him into that strength 7 bracket is actually really nice. A lot of medium vehicles and even big monsters are strength 7. And if you are strength 7 with +1 to wound, it means you're actually wounding them on 3s, which is pretty cool. Also, speaking of monsters, he has a special rule called being there, seeing it, killed it. Each time this model makes a melee attack against an enemy monster unit, you can reroll the wound roll. Now, that's great on its own. It means against most monsters, you'll be wounding them on 4s with 4 rerolls. But if you're going against someone like Angron, and this is insane, but technically a brutal strength Straken with frontline combatant will hit Angron on 2s and will wound Angron on 3s with full rerolls. That's pretty insane. And if you were to really take things to pants on head world and go completely down the rabbit hole, you could take a regimental preacher. You could use his righteous rhetoric ability to get 4 rolls to hit on Straken, and then you could start fishing for those exploding 6s to really spike his damage up. I'm not certain that's a good idea though, simply because righteous rhetoric is very unreliable. It only goes off on a 3+, and also it kind of starts moving away from what makes Straken so great, which is that he's cheap. If you're spending 25 points on upgrading your Cadian Castellan to Straken, or 40 points to upgrade your Deathcore Marshal to Straken, and then you start adding in a preacher as well, you start getting towards the point where you might as well just ended up taking those Rough Riders. I would leave the preacher at home. He's very much a cool thing on paper, but personally I think keeping Straken cheap and nasty is the way to go. But that, my dear conscripts, concludes why I think Colonel Ironhand Straken is the most badass character in Warhammer 40k right now. And he may even be one of the most points efficient combat beasts in the whole damn game. But let me know what you think down in that comment section. Have you been convinced to jump on the Straken hype train? Or were you already firmly aboard? If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you found today's video particularly entertaining or informative, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. By becoming a supporter, you will gain access to the Mordy and Glory Discord server, which is an online community of well over 1,000 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord, and we've got tactics talks, army list help, painting, hobbying, and even a pretty spicy meme section. And I just want to take a moment now to say a big thank you to all of the latest channel members. So thank you to Tristan T, Christian H, Ike, Funbro, Archie Norman, The Chaparral Fox, Deo of the Gamer, Dylan Areno, George Catton, Jason Hoyland, Mystic Flair, Funny Guy, Jarvo, Nakata Kitano, Joseph George, Miles One, Leafy Breeze Studios, TS, Devils, Lorvan, Mac Uric, Rafe Plots, The Consensual Gamer, and a Gaming Stuka. Thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreons as well, so a massive thank you to Michael S, Cocaine Cowboy, Simeon V, Philip K, Ebola, and Steely. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, special, heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys. Your incredibly generous support makes a huge difference, and it's a big part of how I'm able to do Mordy and Glory full time. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.